Shalom. Welcome to Light to the Nations. We are in the midst of the 4th chapter, Parak Daled, of Hilchot Beit HaBechira, and the great Maimonides is going over some of the measurements of the Second Temple according to his own particular approach, which is actually quite unique. And the next 3 halachot, Gimel, Daled, and Hey, are all taken up with this rather unique approach of the Rambam to the dimensions of the Second Temple. You know, I think we've been emphasizing consistently since we began studying Hilchot Beit HaBechira that the purpose of our study is not just to be occupied with another area of Torah wisdom. Indeed, the purpose of Torah study is not to be occupied with wisdom, not to accumulate more knowledge, but indeed it's lilmod al manat la'asot. It is learning on the condition for the purpose of doing, of action, which is really the central theme of a Torah-based life. And indeed, when Ezekiel the prophet was told by the Almighty to go over the measurements of the Holy Temple and to learn the measurements of the Holy Temple, he made it clear to him that it was for the purpose of rebuilding. So this is something that we have emphasized. Those people today, those precious souls, you included, that are drawn to the subject, the study of the Holy Temple for its own sake, realizing that this is that which Hashem requires of us, and that this is also that which the world needs so desperately in order for us to have, once again, the Shekhinah amongst us. But I feel that this is a good time, once again, for me to emphasize the centrality of this idea and really the irony of what's going on all around us even as we speak, because we are presently in a time, as we are going to record this particular program, where there is a delegation of rabbis in Washington that are having some talks with the top people in the administration of the United States to plead for the cause of the rights of the Jewish people to the Temple Mount and of the absolute prohibition for the Jewish people to renege on this divine mandate of Jewish presence on the Temple Mount. And here we have the following halachot in the Rambam in this chapter that are going to be very detailed and very much, very specific regarding the measurements of the Holy Temple. And at this very time in history, once again, the whole concept of whether or not the Jewish people can have anything to look forward to, indeed have any right whatsoever, have any connection to the place of the Holy Temple, is being challenged. And there are other powers that be, that seem to be calling the shots and that seem to be invested in seeing to it that they make their mark upon world history, and that they and that in the end, ultimately, they have the decision and the final power regarding the outcome of world history and Jewish history. And this is the time, once again, for us to emphasize the fact that the Torah is timeless, that the Torah is Hashem's will, that the Jewish people have a destiny to fulfill, which is not for their own sake, but for the sake of the entire world, to bring about redemption. That the Jewish people, in fulfilling the mandate that Hashem gave them, do not need the world's permission. And on the contrary, if the world, as the Midrash says, would only understand how important the Holy Temple was for them, they would see to it that it was protected and armed, that nothing should ever happen to it, because it brings about such a state of excellence and blessing for the entire world. So here, while at the one hand we are confronted once again with a situation wherein the Jewish people, their right to the place of the Holy Temple is being challenged, on the other hand, Maimonides is about to tell us the exact dimensions of the Second Temple for the purpose of its rebuilding, how high it was, and the exact space of every door jamb, and the distance between east to west and north to south. So when we are confronted with voices and powers that say, well, there never was a Holy Temple altogether, and you're making the whole thing up, and this is not a Jewish site, there never was a Holy Temple altogether. Not only do I know that there was a Holy Temple, but I know how high it was. I know exactly how it looked. I know exactly how it's supposed to look again. And more importantly, I know why. And that's really what we're sharing when we discuss the dimensions of the Holy Temple for the purpose of rebuilding. It's not only a question of a very specific scholarly and a particular area of Torah knowledge. It's really the embodiment of the whole purpose of studying Torah. Change. The purpose of rectification, of fixing, of making a betterment for Israel and for the entire human race. And that is really the purpose of life, the purpose of existence, knowing who Hashem is, bringing the light of the divine presence into the world, as embodied by the whole concept of the Holy Temple. So it's very apropos in these very days that are fraught with contention and with the challenge to the Jewish people, as it were, to once again have to prove their connection to the Temple Mount. This is our connection. Halacha Gimel of Perek Dalet, the 4th chapter of the Rambam Hilchot Beit HaBechira, begins to tell us exactly about the dimensions of the Holy Temple. And that is really the answer to these voices that we hear today. Our redoubling of effort and our commitments to the reality of the Holy Temple. So, it's just so important to always bear in mind that we are not occupied with ancient history, we're occupied with future history in the making. Halacha Gimel, Hahechal shebanu b'nei Gola haya me'a ama al rum me'a. Maimonides is going to be teaching us that the measurements of the sanctuary, as he describes it as constructed by those who returned from the Babylonian exile, was 100 amma by 100 amma and 100 amma high. Now, we're going to see that Maimonides has a very particular approach to the dimensions of the Heichal, the sanctuary, where he actually defines it as a perfect cube. This is actually a radical departure from many of the other commentaries, but of course we're going to explain first and foremost the position of Maimonides. And let's just reflect for a moment before he goes and explains the minute details of how he arrives at this figure, the 100 by 100 by 100. Let's just think for a moment about the height itself of the sanctuary. What Maimonides just told us, al rum me'ah, that this 100 amma by 100 amma is also 100 amma high. Now, when we remember having studied in the very beginning of our series, in the first chapter of Hilchot Beit HaBechira, we learned there that it is a commandment to beautify the temple, to make it as splendid as possible, as the congregation is able, and also to make it high, to make it the highest building. Now, remember when we were studying about the biblical measurement of the amma, that we learned that there are a number of different opinions as to the amma, and that, in fact, when it comes to the Holy Temple itself, more than one amma was used. But still in all, generally speaking, an amma is, on an average man, from the tip of the middle finger to the elbow. But today, that can be measured in one of two ways, and the opinion that we can easily cite is 60 centimeters. So that doesn't sound like very much. An amma is 60 centimeters. But if we say that the sanctuary was 100 amma high, that means that it was 6,000 centimeters high, and that means that it was almost 200 feet, over 196 feet. That means that the Holy Temple reached a height of nearly 20 stories, which is indeed something very impressive, especially for the circumstances under which it was built at that time. So we have here a description that Maimonides begins for us regarding the aspects of the dimensions of the Second Temple as they were rendered by those who returned originally from the Babylonian exile. And all of these halachot, basically, which the Rambam is now giving us in a very actual way, are based on the Mishnayot that we find in the 4th chapter of Masechet Midot. And you recall that Tractate Midot, which literally means attributes, is, of course, in many ways a blueprint of the temple itself. So this halacha as well, the first one that we are mentioning here, is based on the Mishnah in Tractate Midot, which basically describes to us the dimensions of the structure of the temple from the foundation until the roof. And as we mentioned, its size essentially can be rendered at 100 amma by 100 amma, reaching to a height also of 100 amma. This very remarkable and singular approach of Maimonides maintains that the structure of the Heichal, the sanctuary itself, is basically a cube, and that is in deference to other opinions. We're going to be speaking about that a little bit later. For example, there is an opinion that the ulam, the entrance hall into the sanctuary, had a different width than the sanctuary itself, but this is not the opinion here of Maimonides. We should also point out that regarding the first temple, the height of the first temple is not mentioned in the Tanakh, only the height of the ulam, which there in Chronicles is listed at 120 amma. So, Maimonides now begins here in Halacha Gimel to describe to us how the breakdown of this 100 amot works. He tells us that first of all there is a foundation of the temple itself. The foundation is called the atum, and this word is really synonymous with the yisod, as it were, the foundation of the building. It's called atum really because it is in fact atum. That means insulated, sealed. It is completely closed in. From the outside, this foundation was not visible at all, and thus its name. So this section, the foundation of the temple, was 6 amot in height, and this formed the foundation of the entire building. Verum katlei habayit 40 amma. From this yisod, which was called the atum, rose up the walls of the sanctuary itself to a height of 40 amot. Now, on the top of the Heichal, there is a ceiling, and this ceiling has several layers. This is a bit complicated. We're going to discuss this now. Above this multi-layered ceiling, there rises a second level to the building itself, and this is something that we're going to be learning more about. So the ceiling, which is called the tikra, which we come to at the top of the 40 amot of the walls of the Heichal, this ceiling, which as I mentioned, we're going to see now, has several layers. This ceiling divides between the level of the Heichal itself, the sanctuary, and the level of the second floor, which is above the sanctuary. And altogether, this ceiling, the tikra, is 5 amot in height. It consists of several levels. The first level is called the kiur, spelled exactly as the word kiur, which we have studied about, that means the laver. This word also is kiur. And this is the first level of the ceiling, which is made of gold, and is actually a gold plating, which is decorated with very beautiful designs. And this is the side that is visible from within the sanctuary. And according to the explanation, the commentary on the Mishnah called the Bartanura, he explains that this is the bottom layer of the ceiling, whose thickness itself, the kior, this golden layer, whose thickness was 1 amma, and because of the fact that it was made of plated gold with decorations, it was called kior. The next level, so the kior itself, the first level of the ceiling being 1 amma, on top of this, going up again towards the roof, there is another section of 2 amot, which is actually a vacuum. It's an empty space. And this space, which is called Beit Dilfa, comes from the word delef, which means a trickling, a spillover. The purpose of this empty space of 2 amot on top of the kior, again, this is all considered part of the ceiling. Purpose of this, according to the Rambam, who explains in his commentary on the Mishnah there in Tractate Midot, this is an area for water that may inadvertently be leaking from a higher level to spill over into. And this is a practice that they had in the Second Temple, that there were spaces between various levels in order to catch any spillover of water that there might be from the roof, so that it would not spill over into the sanctuary itself. It would gather in this empty space. So in other words, according to Maimonides, basically this space between the bottom layer of the ceiling and the next layer above it was specifically for the purpose of catching the water, as opposed to other opinions that we may learn about. Now, on top of the Beit Dilfa, va'avi hatikra she'al gabi Beit Dilfa, Maimonides continues and tells us, ama umaziva gova ama. We need to look at the illustration in order to understand these layers. Above the walls of the 40 amot of the Kodesh, of the Heichal, begins the ceiling. Again, the first layer of the ceiling called the Kior, the gold plating. Above it, the space of 2 amah for catching the water. Then we have another layer of 1 amah in height called Maziva. And this is actually the top layer of the ceiling. And Maimonides explains to us, again in his commentary on the Mishnah, that this is the external layer, the layer of plaster and stones, which completes the ceiling. Va'aliyah b'nuya al gabav, and then above this last level of the ceiling, there is a second story. Gova katleha arba'im amah, which also rises another 40 amot above the Heichal itself, above the sanctuary. This second story of the building of the temple is known as the Aliyah, and basically it was empty except for that area that we have studied about already, which was taken up by the Amatraksin, the 2 curtains that were hung from the top of that area and hung all the way down to separate between the Holy and the Holy of Holies. Other than that, the area of the Aliyah is empty. So that takes care of the Maziva, and that takes care of the 40 amot of the second story. Uvegaga gova ama kior, va'amatayim gova beit dilfa, va'ama tikra, va'ama maziva. And then above the second story, above the Heichal, we have once again the same concept of the multi-layered ceiling that we already learnt about regarding the first level of the Heichal. We have, once again, we have the level of the golden decorated part, and then we have the area to catch rainfall and the empty area, and then we have the Tikra, and once again the Maziva. And then Maimonides tells us, V'gova hama'akeh shalosh amot. And then, on top of everything, we have the roof itself. V'tas shel barzel kimos saif gavo ama al gabe hama'akeh saviv kedei shelo yanuchu alav ha'ofot. In all of the classic representations, the illustrations that have been made of the Holy Temple, you always see the golden, kind of look like spikes or teeth on top of the building itself of the sanctuary. They're actually not necessarily made of gold. In fact, the language of Maimonides is that they were metal, v'tas shel barzel. And he describes this as metalwork which was like blades, 1 amah high, that rested on top of the roof. And the purpose of this was to discourage birds from alighting there. V'hu nikra kale orev. And this was called the kale orev, which literally means, in Hebrew, How shall we define kaleh? It was the extinguishing, as it were. It was the diminishing of the ravens. It was a device that was employed to discourage the birds from alighting there, which would have been a type of blemish in the honor of the sanctuary. It would have been something of a degradation to the dignity of the Holy Temple to have birds alighting there. So Maimonides concludes and tells us, Hare hakol mea amma. If we take all of these measurements that we have learned now, the 6 amot of the atum, and then the 40 amot of the kodesh itself, of the sanctuary, then we have altogether 5 amot of the layers of the first tikra, another 40 amot of the height of the second story of the aliyah above the sanctuary. Then we have again 5 amot of the various layers of the second part of the tikra of the ceiling. On top of this again, maziva of plaster, 1 amma. And on the very top we have the ma'aka, which is a guardrail, which is 3 amot high. And then we have 1 more amma of the kaleh orev, the serrated metalwork on top of the sanctuary that prevents the alighting of birds. Altogether, from top to bottom, we have 100 amot, which again, if we would translate into modern terms, would be approximately a building of 20 stories high. Now, I mentioned that Maimonides' opinion regarding the actual structure of the sanctuary is much different than others, and that is something that we're going to be able to appreciate more as we continue the next 2 halachot, where Maimonides is going to tell us also the dimensions from west to east, as well as from north to south, of the sanctuary itself. And that's something that we didn't see so much in just the issue of the heights. But suffice it to say, these halachot, the one which we have just done, halacha gimel, as well as the next 2, are quite complex. They have many nuances. They are reflected in the Mishnayot and Masechet Midot, but my goal in these 3 halachot is going to be to present as bird's eye view as possible of these dimensions, because it's actually quite complex. I'm trying to make it very simple, but there are those who disagree with Maimonides' opinion. And the more that we would understand about the Mishnayot and Tractate Midot, the more we would see that there seem to be some things that contradict that. There seem to be different ways of looking at things. The important thing for us first to grasp and to clarify are these basic measurements, so that we can get an idea of the width and the height and the length of the building in general before we get more specific. So, in our next halacha, halacha daled, which we can now start, Maimonides begins to measure the structure itself from the west to the east. And this also is based on the Mishnayot in Tractate Midot. It's actually the 4th chapter, and you can find this basic outline in Mishnah number 7 of chapter 4 in Tractate Midot. However, in that Mishnah, the difference is that there we have a description of the length of the sanctuary from east to west. And here Maimonides is going to be telling us from west to east. So he tells us in Halacha Daled, Min ha'ma'arav le'mizrach me'a amma v'zeu cheshbonan. From west to east, we find also 100 amot, 100 cubits, as he is about to detail. And again, Maimonides is going to be showing us, just as he showed us now in Halacha Gimel, 100 amot from the atum, from the foundation, to the very top of the kaleh orev, so also from side to side, widthwise as well as lengthwise, we're going to be arriving at a computation of exactly 100 amot, a 100 by 100 by 100 cube, according to Maimonides. And again, we're going to learn that this is in somewhat of a drastic departure from another opinion regarding the entrance to the temple, the ulam, and here we do have to rectify how Maimonides views a statement made by the Mishnah that he does seem to be in contradiction to. We're going to get to that in our next lesson. And once again, the main thing for us to understand is that the blueprint of the rebuilding of the temple is something that we are responsible for. And that is why Maimonides' opinion, as well as all of the other opinions, must be clarified, must be weighed against each other, they must be rectified, and our understanding of how these things work according to the Mishnah, which is of course the blueprint of the Holy Temple, has tremendous significance for the Jewish people and for the whole world, and how we view our understanding of these halachot will make all of the difference to the destiny of humanity. As in every other area of Torah study, our purpose is to bring the light of the Divine Presence into our lives, into the lives of each other, into the world, to change the world for the better. And the very embodiment of our ability and the empowerment that Hashem gives us to change the world to the better is the building of the Holy Temple to bring about the resting of the Divine Presence in the world. And once again, no matter what anyone says, no matter what forces we seem to be up against, the truth of the importance of the Holy Temple will come out for the Jewish people and for the whole world. And that, of course, is the secret of the resting of the Divine Presence, the light to Israel and the light to the nations.